So, if you've been trying to make sense of the economy lately, you're probably feeling, well, a little confused, right? One report says demand is falling, but the next says shipping costs are through the roof. None of it seems to add up. But here's the thing. Underneath all that noise, something huge is happening. A once-in-a-generation shift. The entire global supply chain is being rewired as we speak. And today, we're going to pull back the curtain and show you the new economic map that's being drawn right now. All right, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll dive into that economic chaos everyone's feeling. Then, we'll get to the heart of it, this massive rewiring happening behind the scenes. We're going to look at why the whole game is shifting from just finding the lowest cost to demanding resiliency, and we'll see what the world's new economic map actually looks like. Once we get that, all that confusing data is finally going to click into place. And we'll wrap up by asking a really big question. Could all of this actually be the beginning of a new American century?
Okay, so let's start with that confusion, because to really get what's going on, you have to understand why everyone feels so lost. And one recent industry report really it summed up the entire mood perfectly with just 2 words.
Yeah, flying blind. That's from a recent Writer industry report, and it just nails it, doesn't it? It's this feeling that the old compass we used to navigate the economy is just broken. All the signals that experts relied on for decades are now pointing in completely different directions, and it's left pretty much everyone just struggling to figure out which way is up.
I mean, just look at this. On one side, everything screams slow down. Consumer demand is flat. The cost to ship stuff from Asia is totally cratering. But then you look at the other side, and it's the exact opposite story. Trucking capacity is tight, meaning trucks are in high demand, and domestic shipping rates are actually rallying. It's like we're looking at 2 totally different economies happening at the exact same time. So this brings us to the big question, right? How can all of this be happening at once? What on earth could explain this level of chaos? Well, the answer isn't some simple market cycle. It's something much, much bigger. And the answer isn't a recession or a boom or anything we've really seen before. It's that we are living through a fundamental restructuring of the entire global economy. The rulebook we've used for the last 40 years is being thrown out, and a new one is being written as we speak. You know, for almost 40 years, the global economy ran on one simple, really powerful idea. Make things wherever it's cheapest, which, let's be honest, almost always meant China, and then just ship them everywhere else. That was the era of hyperglobalization. But then, starting in the late 2010s, the system got hit with shock after shock. Trade wars, a global pandemic that shattered supply chains, and new geopolitical conflicts. That stable, predictable world, it's gone.
You know, FreightWave's CEO Craig Fuller had this perfect analogy for it. For decades, the global supply chain was just like the power company. It just worked. So nobody ever thought about it. But now, the power is flickering, and suddenly, everyone is realizing just how fragile this whole system really is.
So, what's really driving this massive rewiring? It all comes down to a huge shift in priorities. We've gone from a world that only cared about the lowest price to one that is demanding stability.
It really breaks down into a 3-part story. First, all those geopolitical shocks made the world feel way more unpredictable. That led to the second driver, a total mindset shift in corporate boardrooms. After getting burned by all the disruptions, the most important question changed from how cheap can we get this to how sure are we that we can even get this? And then the third piece. Governments, especially the US, started pouring historic amounts of money into bringing manufacturing back home.
And what this all means is that logistics is no longer some boring back-office department worried about trucks and ships. It's now a top-level, C-suite strategic issue. Companies now get that a fragile supply chain is a massive threat to their business, and they are rethinking everything to make themselves safer and more resilient. Now, this strategic shift isn't just a theory. It's literally redrawing the map of global trade in real time. So let's take a look at what this new world actually looks like.
The big idea driving this new map is a word you're going to hear a lot more: nearshoring. It's super simple, really. Instead of making your stuff halfway across the planet, companies are moving production closer to home, to countries in their own backyard. It's all about closing the distance to lower the risk. And this is the change in a nutshell. The old map was all about giant ships crossing the Pacific Ocean, all in the name of finding the absolute lowest cost. The new map? It's about regional networks, trucks and trains moving goods within North and South America. And the goal isn't cost, it's creating reliable, resilient supply chains. And on this new map, a country like Mexico is in the perfect spot to become a massive hub. But it's not just Mexico.
This quote really captures this surprise even the experts are feeling as totally new players show up on the map. As companies hunt for stable partners here in the Western Hemisphere, countries you might not expect, like Colombia, are suddenly in the conversation. They have an educated workforce, strong ties to the US, and suddenly they're a great option. A whole new economic ecosystem is literally taking shape right in our own hemisphere.
Okay, so now that we have this idea of a great rewiring in mind, let's go back to all that confusing data we saw at the beginning. Because suddenly, all that chaos is going to start to look like a pretty clear pattern.
Let's start with the first piece of the puzzle. If companies are actively moving production out of Asia and bringing it closer to home, what would you expect to happen to the cost of shipping something from China?
And boom, this chart shows exactly that. You can see the price of shipping a container from China to North America has just fallen off a cliff since the pandemic highs. This is the rewiring in action. As companies shift production, there's just less stuff that needs to be moved across the Pacific. So it's not that the entire economy is collapsing, it's that the freight itself is moving somewhere else.
Okay, so that explains one side of the mystery. But what about the other side? If things aren't coming from China as much, how does that explain why the US domestic market is so strong?
Well, it means that freight is shifting from those giant ocean ships to domestic trucks and trains. And that's exactly what we're seeing here in the data for domestic rail. While trans-Pacific shipping is falling apart, freight volume within North America has stayed really strong and consistent. So that flying blind feeling, it wasn't chaos. It was the signal of two economic worlds operating at once, the old global system winding down and the new regional one ramping up.
This is way bigger than just a temporary blip in logistics. The long-term implications of this rewiring are absolutely massive and could end up reshaping the global economic order for the next 50 years.
What we are witnessing, and this is not an exaggeration, is nothing less than an American manufacturing renaissance. After decades of hearing about decline, for the first time in a very long time, major industrial investment and jobs are actually coming back to the United States. And this isn't some future prediction, it is happening right now.
And this isn't happening by accident. It's being supercharged by huge government investments in the key industries of the future. We're talking EVs, batteries, semiconductors. And what's really powerful here is the multiplier effect. Think about it. For every single new job inside a factory, that factory creates up to 5 more jobs in the community around it, for everything from the suppliers who make the parts to the truckers who haul the finished goods away.
So in the end, this great rewiring is about so much more than just shipping containers. It is a fundamental shift that is building a whole new economic reality right underneath our feet. For the first time in most of our lifetimes, a new American industrial era is actually dawning. And the real question isn't if it's going to happen anymore, it's what are we going to choose to build with it.